What up, nerds? Let's talk TTRPG.
Goblin Gab! Goblin Gab! Listen to Goblin Gab!
Hello, and welcome back to Goblin Gab, episode 10. Yep, thank you. Almost
I got you.
Forgot to remember that.
I got you.
Forget to remember a lot of things, but yeah, you got my back. Great. Yeah, episode 10. Fantastic episode today. Literally.
Yeah.
It's we have Rick Perry from Dimension 20 on later on, which is amazing to even say or comprehend.
Yeah, it's like a fever dream.
Yeah, but he's here and he's talking to us for some reason. But we're so grateful he was on. Amazing interview later on.
Yeah.
We are going to be talking all about crafting encounters. You and I are. This is going to be the encounter episode. So
Yes. And spoiler alert, Rick Perry's also from Texas, so
yeah. Full Texas going on here today. Super excited. And then, of course, we're going to get into some hot takes after the interview. Some of your community hot takes. Which some spicy ones in there.
Because we love to stir the cauldron.
Yep. So stick around for the spice later on. But of course, first up is our sponsor, which is us.
Yeah.
No sponsor today, but all episodes of The Scarlet Threat, which is our Gothic D&D campaign, is up now on Spotify. We will put the link down below. Just 10 episodes. Fun, just two-person campaign, tabletop for two. We're all about playing, with just two people.
That's kind of our shtick.
Yep. And our first season of our full campaign is out on Spotify, which is awesome.
Yeah, and I know a couple episodes ago we talked about we were going to do a little Western mini campaign. If you're interested in that, The Edge of Nowhere. Thank you, Critical Crafting, for letting us use your world. But that first episode is up also on YouTube.
Mm-hmm. We might get into a couple more episodes. We might not. It stands alone as a good one shot. We'll see what happens. But most importantly, first at the top of the news today is the week that this episode airs is PAX East.
Yeah.
Which we will be at.
Yes, we will. Boston. We're going to be
up in Boston.
All up in you.
Yep, we are going to be in Boston at PAX East. Not too many obligations. We are checking out a couple games for content stuff, but we want to play some games, so we might get in there and just play with you guys. If you see us there, say hello. We would love to meet you, take pictures, all that kind of fun stuff. We'll be there all weekend.
Yeah.
So
let's make some memories. Let's make some friends.
Yeah. So super fun about that. But other news. So you know how Dungeon Dudes, the Drakkenheim was on D&D Beyond, and they got there. Now they are kickstarting the Monsters of Drakkenheim.
Ooh, like for their own book?
Yeah, for the book of Monsters of Drakkenheim.
Oh, I love that for them. Yeah,
and the monsters of their world are very like Lovecraftian, like eldritch horror type.
Yeah.
Very macabre, like body horror, like existential, larger. I'm all about those large, creepy, like fucking guys. So looks super awesome. We'll put a link down below to go for their Kickstarter for that.
Love that.
Because that'd be sick. Speaking of official D&D and Wizards of the Coast stuff, did you know StartPlaying.games is now officially part of Wizards of the Coast?
Is it?
Yeah.
Wow.
They announced the other day. We are going to have him on at some point. He reached out to us. We just have to coordinate schedules.
Which, welcome to the D&D community, as you constantly have scheduling to worry about.
Yeah, but I would love to have him on to talk more because that's great. We've been directing people to start playing games for a long time. Like when they're like commenting and they're like, oh, well, how do I find a game? I don't know how to blah, blah, blah. And then we're like, oh, go here.
Go here.
Because it's great for the community to be able to find people to play with.
Yeah. Like I know a lot of people make jokes about like, oh, we need like a dating app, but for finding D&D players. Mm-hmm. StartPlaying.games is about the closest thing you're going to get.
Yeah. I mean, the GMs have a profile, which you could see like they even have ratings, I think. Like you can like rate them. And so you can see if they're like poopy or not.
Yeah. Thankfully,
cheeks.
So if any of them are the red flag DMs that we've made plenty of hilarious videos about. Oh yeah. That way you'll know and you'll see a good fit.
Yeah. So that's awesome for them over at Start Playing Games because they're doing great stuff and
I feel like that merger just kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I'm glad to see them. Yeah. Get with all the what?
With all of the, D&D Beyond is really trying. I feel like, I don't know if it's because of Roll20 kind of being up and coming, but Wizards of the Coast and D&D Beyond are kind of picking up on the, more virtual, all-inclusive things like building your own maps and building your own things.
They're trying,
and sets.
yeah.
And I feel like incorporating something like startplaying.games on there, it deserves its own little like forum on there to be like, oh yeah, and while you're here, here's how you can find games to play.
Yeah, totally fair. I mean, they're trying. They're investing a lot of money into like video games and stuff right now, which is a segue to my next news point. Did you see that? That was a good segue, right?
It was.
I'm usually bad at those.
I'm usually too quick at them.
Gameloft Montreal is the first official studio to announce that they are making a licensed Wizards of the Coast D&D game.
Like console game or PC game?
PC and console. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's by the same. Gameloft Montreal has made such prolific games as Disney Dreamlight Valley and the Oregon Trail. You know, not dissing. It takes a lot of effort and
dysentery. What?
Yeah, good one.
Yeah.
Not doing anything. You know, not talking shit. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of people, a lot of very creative people, a lot of very talented people to make a video game at all.
Right.
It's a miracle a video game gets made at all.
Yeah.
But like, what the fuck are those? You know, it's like why did Wizards of the Coast they're like, yeah, we should get the makers of Oregon Trail to, or like the you know, people who remade Oregon Trail to make a D&D game. It's described as a hybrid of survival, life simulation, and action RPG.
So it's going to focus more on the combat?
I don't know.
I'm assuming, and
No,
survival?
because it says life sim. So yeah, it's like survival. So you have to.
So like a lot of exploration, I assume. Be a ranger.
I think it's like a gathering type thing because they said it's a real time strategy game, which is like StarCraft and Age of Empires.
Okay.
So I imagine it's a lot of like building up a camp and, you know, gathering things, building things.
Okay, and like if it's the creators from Oregon Trail, you have to make sure that like if you gather like rations and you're hunting and you have clean water and like that stuff.
I think it's actually like, you know, and I was talking shit because that's what I do, but like I think it's a good fit because like it could be, if they do it right, it could be very nostalgic. Like it could be like a text based, like something like Oregon Trail is and very like lo-fi, very like, you know, because Baldur's Gate was the AAA version of it.
And it's such a larger than life video game.
Yeah, we don't need another Baldur's Gate right now. Like I would
yet.
love a little like hex crawly exploration survival type game. Like that sounds cool.
Yeah.
You know?
That sounds unique.
Yeah. And but they are investing heavily into video games.
Well, I love that.
Wizard of the Coast is right now, which is crazy. That means we're going to get a lot of awesome stuff. The big goings on right now, I've seen everyone talk about it, and we talked about it even last episode, but Daggerheart's going nuts.
I actually read a little article today, just kind of skimmed over it, but like the character creation.
Yeah.
And I love the alternatives, the few alternatives that they've created for like the classes and the races, because as someone who was going to write a book, I had the genius idea of writing a book based on a backstory of one of my first character, and then realizing that almost everything that I want to write about is either trademarked or copyrighted, and I was like, well, shit, I'm gonna have to find alternatives for most everything. But I'm like, it's not as hard as you might think.
I feel like you're psyching yourself out.
I think I am. I've already started like making
it's like,
transitions.
It's not like they have fucking you know, trademarked dragons.
No, or elves, or dwarves, or
So it's like you might have to change the name of places. You know, that's really it. Like I think it's getting built up more in your head as like a bigger issue than it is. But
it's very cool, and I think Daggerheart. I think it was it's going to be really cool. I'm excited to see people's like actual plays and what they can do with it.
The only discourse I've seen about it is that it doesn't really do a good job. So right now it's the way that it's designed is for like cooperation, you know, like a party to party. It doesn't take into account that there are shitty players.
Shitty as in like bad at mechanics, or shitty as in like their character?
Like bad,
they're a bad person.
Like bad persons. Bad peoples. Like it doesn't take into account that like not everyone at the table is striving to be like cooperative and to do things together. They are striving to cause chaos.
Well, then that's not the fucking game for you.
Yeah, well, exactly. But I just seen some like discourse say that like it doesn't do a good job of protecting that, and it just kind of assumes that everyone's going to happy-go-lucky cooperate. You know,
and like that everyone wants to be a hero.
Kind of, I guess. Yeah, I don't know, but whatever. I mean, it seems cool. We'll probably play it eventually. I've seen a lot of creators want to play it. We talked about it last episode, but we'll probably get into it at some point.
Yeah.
I feel like
we have lots of things on our plate, but we can add it for dessert.
Yeah. Yeah, we
eventually.
I like to pile things on,
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
It's mostly onto me.
Your eyes are bigger than your creative stomach.
Yeah. It's mostly I'm put it all on me. I just make you show up. And which is fine. You still do work too.
Thank you.
All right, but that's all I have for news. Do you have anything?
No.
Okay. End of show.
I just have the notes for our topic today, which goes along with the conversation we're gonna have with Rick.
Yeah. So, real quick thing I want to say before we get into the topic: Critical Role sucks.
What?
All right, now that everyone's paying attention, we're talking about crafting encounters and ways to make encounters more fun, more not difficult, but more challenging.
Yeah.
We're trying to find a nice balance between fun and rewarding, but still challenging and, tough.
Yeah, because challenging does not mean you're probably gonna die. That's to me, that's not what challenging means. That means
the
I'm
threat's
gonna make you
there.
think a little bit.
Yeah.
And one of you might go down, but
yeah, I'm going to talk about it from a DM's perspective. You're going to talk about it from a player's perspective.
Per usual, yeah.
Yeah. As a DM, when it comes to crafting encounters, I'll admit that this isn't something that I'm strong on. I'm very much in the camp of just throw a big bad monster at them and it'll be fine. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I weave it into the story very well.
You do.
You fought a lot of your player's parents is the rogue's parent is a master thief and a runner of a thieves guild.
Of course.
And just stuff like that. Just the way that I like to do it is just weave it into the story and have an impactful emotional moment. And I feel like that's a good starting place if you don't really know how to design interesting encounters. Like Brennan and Rick are great at designing very interesting encounters. Where they have water levels that rise and they have to go hit valves and they have to jump across platforms and they got to get creative.
Yeah, I forget the amount of depth that. The potential depth that encounters have, difficult terrain and whatever. And then
half cover.
And then I play Baldur's Gate and I remember the difficult terrain exists and then I hate it. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is why when I potentially, I don't care. Because if I'm trying to get from here to here and all of a sudden you're like, oh, and now it's 4 feet of mud and now you're stuck for 3 turns in this fucking mud and now you can't do anything, I'm going to be so pissed.
I mean, I get it that it makes you try to think outside of the box.
Yeah.
And especially, because we've...
Using your surroundings.
Yeah, exactly. To your advantage, too.
Yeah, using your other players,
Yeah, casting command on, at night, going and hiding on the other side of a mud pit and casting command and making him come towards you.
Yeah.
And he'd get stuck in mud. It's it is there to deter you, but it's also there to use it to your advantage.
Yeah, and I have a Aarakocra sidekick who shows up for big battles in our home game. And so he was my... helper, assistant, whatever, when we were performing. And so sometimes I'll have him pick me up and put me places, or I'll swipe at something and I'm up in the air. Just little things like that make you think.
Yeah, which I am self-admittedly very bad at. It's great that I, when I run modules or homebrewed version of modules, because that kind of stuff's already in there.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Especially, modules designed for 1 to 7 level characters or something like that, because they will slowly ramp that kind of stuff up. They're oh, this encounter has, the goblins are going to go for cover and half cover. So, and it kind of describes that, because it's not meant to show oh, look, I know this mechanic that you don't know and now it's going to be harder to win. It's there to show you how to do it, show you players how to do it.
I know I keep referencing Baldur's Gate, but it's just because it's helpful to picture encounters the mission where you're down in the depths in the submarines
in Act 3,
and and you have only a certain amount of turns.
Yeah.
And if you don't either rescue everyone or kill the big bad or, extinguish something or grab that artifact, if you don't do something in this many turns, the whole thing's going to blow up, or something's going to go underwater, or someone's going to die, or that. I am putting it on my bucket list as a potential next DM. I want to put some shit where
a time limit.
A time limit. I think that because as a player, that would make me sweat, but in the best way, because that is when we're going to have to strategize as players, because one or two of us is going to have to take a couple turns and not do damage. We're going to have to risk not doing any damage because we're going to have to go around. It's like in I think in the first season of Vox Machina, when they're like trying to do something, but the room starts filling up with acid and they have to like go down into the acid and like crank it and turn it so it starts to drain.
Yep.
That is like, oh my God, like it makes me sweat just thinking about it, but like in a good way.
Yeah, but and it's also a way to like utilize what your characters are good at,
Yeah.
you know? So it's like while the fighter and the barbarian or the fighter and the paladin are on the front lines like fighting them off, the rogue can sneak in and try to unlock this thing that makes the trap fall and kill all of them instantly, you know? Or the bard can go charm one of the prisoners to help them escape, and you know, stuff like that. So it's also think about what your players are good at and design ways for them to do what they're good at.
Which I feel like for some DMs, that right there is what you just said is a hot take, because we have seen comments and seen stories from DMs who are like, how do I design an encounter that goes against everything that my players aren't good at, and like make sure that they can't use what they're good at, because I don't want to, you know, my poor big monster is going to get hurt. And it's like you do realize that that's kind of the point, right?
I mean, that's the power tripper, right? Like that's the one who wants to just throw a big monster and like smush them and kill
like
them, and
hopes for a TPK.
Yeah, and no, not always. Like sometimes, you know, throwing a big ass monster at them and just a straightforward big ass monster encounter is a cool thing to do.
Yeah,
is the right thing to do, but not always. You know, sometimes you throw a big monster at them, like in like Venom Fang in Phandelver, when he's there to tell you, hey, you should not run in and try and fight people right away, because sometimes they're stronger than you are, you know?
Yeah.
And not every encounter can just be won with brute strength.
Or sheer willpower.
Yeah. So obviously, like, encounters are there to teach your players things and to allow them to do the things that they're best at.
Yeah.
I would say.
Definitely.
How would you say from a player's perspective you make combat like more interesting?
So I like to think of it in like two, you know, distinct little pillars. You have the story crafting and the narrative portion of it. The how do I want to flavor my attacks? Did I just level up? Are there new spells that I really want to test out? Are there new weapons that I just got that I want to test out, or new feats or whatever? Sure. And like, how does that look? How can I look cool, basically? And then the other half is the more crunchy, is the mechanics, is the, you know, and granted, this is going to be more for people who are a little bit more familiar with the mechanics of D&D, but like I think about things like I definitely listen to you as a DM for those little hints about like, did that monster take half damage, or is he vulnerable to a certain type of damage? And like how, you know, usually because of the way that I understand the world and understand the mechanics, it's like if there is a big, giant, bulky monster that we're going up against, I'm going to use all of my dex save spells, because this big, lumbering idiot's probably not going to be very nimble. However, if we're going up against this absolute psycho of a wizard, and he's this powerful, almighty whatever, I'm not going to try to use charm person or wisdom saving spells, because that's probably not going to work on him, because he's way like... You have to understand and really get into the mind or body of your enemy and think like what would be good against it. Like, yeah. And I know that sometimes, and I'm not the only one that feels this, is that like you get into combat and the pressure's on and you might like fuck some things up. Like I have on more than one occasion, just because it was like whatever, used Hellish Rebuke as a tiefling on like a fire demon. And I'm like, oh.
Or like another tiefling or something.
Yeah, and I'm like, fucking hell, like that's not going to do anything. But like thinking about things like that, like, hey, we're going up against a bunch of zombies. I should probably not use necrotic spells on a necrotic creature.
Listen to what the DM's telling you.
And because if they're a good DM like you are, they will give you those hints. You will say things like, oh wow, that really hit him. Like, or you notice that like he really shrugged that off. Like,
yeah,
because a lot of and so it's like
didn't seem like it did too much. Yeah, damn.
Yeah.
And then even especially for new players, like I will give them like another, whenever you click on something and it says, "Are you sure you want to do that?" That kind of thing. It's like especially for new players, like when y'all were in the Wave Echo Cave, and then y'all were up against a flame skull, and Josh was like, "Let's cast Fireball," and I was like, "You want to cast Fireball on a flame skull?"
Yeah, and I was like.
He's like, it took a second for him to like realize it. It's like think about it. Just think about what we're telling you. Because we're giving you help here. We're helping you.
Exactly. And then of course there is the other side of it, which is my character and how do I feel about this villain? How do I like how does my character and how does my backstory like cater to like how I'm going to respond or react to this villain? And like a great example of this is our first campaign. My first character was Cinder. Shout out. Was a silver dragonborn paladin, and one of the first dragons the first dragon that we encountered was a silver dragon, Baldric.
Yep.
And that was such an emotional like turning point moment in like for me in that campaign, because for Cinder, like she saw that as like her kin, and she knew about silver dragonborn about silver dragons that like they're not evil creatures. They're not chaotic creatures typically. But in that case, he had been like taken over by like a curse and basically possessed, and he wasn't able to shake it off. And she had to do what was necessary. And even though she was hesitant and she was like desperate to not kill him and not hurt him, because like in her mind, it was like, no, he's good inside. He's deep down, like he's in there. But then she had to come to the realization that like, if we don't do anything, we're all going to die, because like, he's clearly not getting through. Like we're not getting through to him. And so it's like, and then that was so powerful, because it's like, you're going to feel it's too simple to just say, well, I'm the good guy and he's the bad guy, so obviously I'm going to kill him. Sometimes it's not that simple.
Yeah, it's very great. I love making those like gray situations. Like, and
that was the first time I cried at the table.
Yeah. I keep alluding to the fact that like the final fight that y'all are going to have is a very tough decision for y'all to make.
I know. And you keep saying that, and it makes me like,
yeah, I'm excited, even though it's taken like 7 weeks until we have another session. I am excited. I love those like no right answer type situations and like throwing those at y'all.
Yeah.
Because it requires like a lot of like genuine conversations, and it requires a lot of like character conversations, because it's like, okay, what would my character really do in this very like morally gray situation?
Exactly. And I feel like it was easier to make that kind of decision when you're a paladin, but like I'm a tiefling bard now. And that was my next example was one of the last campaign or sessions that we had was basically taking down, his name was Crane, and he was this grimy, gross, just slime bag. And he was a tax guy, and he was just...
Like he couldn't get any worse. He had to be a tax guy.
He was a tax guy, yeah. And like he, had his claws in Baldur's Gate and was fucking up everyone's money, and he was also taking advantage...
Working with a beholder, yeah,
of like these dancers, of these tieflings, and me being a tiefling. Like when I did finally get to confront him, like I thought even before the session, I was like, okay, I think that this is going to be the session we're going to take on Crane, and like this is how Pandora feels about it, and like she's so angry at him because it's like he's hurt people like her very specifically, and this feels personal. That by the time, and I had all this planned of all these things that I was going to say, I had notes that I was going to have a little monologue before I killed him. And then I got to that moment, and I was just so the vengeance like took over her, and I did the whole Anakin Skywalker thing with Count Dooku, and just double blade sliced his head off and just looked him dead in the eye. I was just like, you deserve this.
Yeah.
And all of that planning went out the window, because in that moment I was like, no, she's too angry. Like she's this close now. She's not gonna risk him somehow, because he had eluded us so many times that it was like, I'm not letting you get away again, like this ends right now. And it was also emotional for a different reason, and it felt very satisfactory for her.
Exactly. It's just another way to, give satisfaction to encounters. And that's like, you can throw all kinds of very powerful people and stuff like that, very despicable people at your players, but you have to make the reward just as, big as the challenge. Mm-hmm. So if you're throwing in just like a random monster for no reason, and they're fighting out of nowhere like an ancient green dragon,
it's like, that's badass.
It's like, what? What? How does that have,
but
any
make it
service?
Make sense.
Yeah. But if it fits into the campaign and you just like solved the emotional turmoil that you've been going through with like these dancers and like all this, and that the reward was finally, because that string that y'all did lasted for so long, mm-hmm. And then there was like a boss before you even got to the boss, there was the scribe, and then you had to fight the beholder, and then finally you can kill Crane. It's mm-hmm. like there were so many big hurdles you had to go through, but it was very satisfying.
It was very satisfying. And it's those little things like, and even if it's not a big bad, but like when you think about your character, it's like, say you come up, and it's a lower level thing, but you come up on like a gang of kobolds, maybe your character, you think of something in your backstory where, a gang of kobolds like ransacked your parents' market when you were a kid, and now you just have it out for kobolds. Or is it something like your parents adopted a kobold when you were a kid, and you grew up with like a half brother who was like an adopted kobold, and you have sympathy towards them? Like those little moments of like, how do I feel about this enemy?
Yeah. One thing that I'll add to like help players in combat is know what you're going to do beforehand.
Yes.
And that requires knowing your character. So like the way that I'll do it if I'm playing is like mechanics and flavor. Like hey DM, here's what I want to do for my action, bonus action, movement, boom, 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 boom. Here's how I flavor that. Mm-hmm. And then he tells me the results of that. It's like boom, 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 done. And that's kind of just, you get the flavor in there. You can rattle off the mechanics really quickly, and it just keeps things moving.
Exactly. And so, when we took on a blue dragon who, crashed our benefit in this auditorium or theater hall, it wasn't just as simple as like, oh, I'm gonna go slash the dragon. No, I was in a trap door under the stage, and I was like, no, I'm gonna go under that, and then I'm gonna flip out, and I'm gonna have my Aarakocra grab me and fly me off the stage, and then go. It's like, think about the flavors, and definitely,
but still know the mechanics too.
Read through, yes. Like I can't stress enough that read through your mechanics, like especially if you do go weeks between sessions. Give yourself, whether it's the night before or like before you leave for that session, give yourself a little refresher. Go through.
Especially if you're a spellcaster.
Especially if you're a spellcaster.
Read up on the spells.
Hey, this is a new one. I kind of want to use this. What would this be, used well in? Or, and what does it look like?
Yeah, because being a spellcaster is hard. Like I'm running for a new table right now, and like the most dedicated player who is like incredibly excited about it is playing a human fighter.
Of course.
Because she doesn't want to take on the spellcasting. It's tough. It really is. And I think she wants to devote her time to like backstory and more, role play and stuff like that, which is great. But it's still, knowing the mechanics will go so far in your game, and knowing what you're going to, even when you're sitting down at combat, figuring out what you're going to do in the next turn while the other people are going. Obviously stay engaged, and if someone does something cool, oh, that's awesome, man. Hell yeah. Like, whatever. Yeah. And
do not zone out just because it's not your turn. I know, especially when you're in a bigger group, it can seem really like, and like Jeopardy music is playing in the background while you're like waiting for it to be your turn. But like that's kind of wrong for a couple reasons. You need to be paying attention to what your other players are doing, because if you have this brilliant plan in mind and 3 turns later you go, but you haven't been paying attention, there could be a buttload of reasons why whatever you were planning isn't going to work now, because you were going to cast Fireball and now half your fucking team is in there, and you're going to knock half of them down if you do that, or if it's, something like that. Or just pay attention to what they're doing in case you need to adjust what you were going to do. If somebody went down and maybe you're the healer and now you need to maybe do a little healing instead of bonking this turn, like just pay attention.
Yeah.
Because it's really rude and it's not good manners for your fellow players or for the DM if you just immediately, once it's not your turn, you just like check out mentally and just like start looking on your phone. Like don't be scrolling and shit just because it's not your turn. Like just stay engaged.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say about a player, for being a player, from a DM's perspective, is don't try to be the main character. Don't try to do everything. You can't be a martial spellcasting, dex-based rogue. Like you can't do that. And it's like
you can't do it all.
You can't. And if you do try to do it all, that's a detriment to your team and your party.
If you try to be good at everything, you're actually going to suck at almost everything.
Yeah, because you're never going to be able to hit anything with your martial class or your spells.
Nope.
You're never going to be able to pass like skill checks because they're so spread out.
You're going to
over the
be
thing.
perfectly fucking average at everything, and when it comes to a game like D&D, you will never. Your succeeding is going to be much lower.
I promise you'll benefit your party way more, especially in combat, if you stick to doing one thing very, very well. And like multi-classing's its whole thing. It's okay when you're like trying to min-max a little bit, like if you're a Gloomstalker and you want to take a couple rogue or whatever.
Because that just makes sense.
And it's great whenever you want to flavor it a little bit. Like you're a fighter, but you've been spending so much time around druid, so you have like a level or two in druid. Like that's cool, as long as it makes sense in the world. But like multi-classing ridiculous things that don't make any sense. It's just like, what are you doing, man? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Like, you just don't need to be doing that kind of stuff. And when you do take on, like, Eldritch Knight fighters or, like, Arcane Trickster rogues and stuff like that, think of how the spells can help supplement your already, like, martialness. You know what I mean? Like, they're there to cast, like, Blade Ward on yourself so that you take less damage or, like, this. They're not there for you to cast, like, Firebolt at range and because now you have no tank. It's like stick to one thing and do that thing well because that'll benefit the party.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. That's my 2 cents with that.
And I will admit, like for the first several months of playing D&D, like that was a really, really hard lesson for me to learn. That I had to really get through my skull was. No, don't try to be good at everything because and granted that also means that sometimes you're going to even fail at the things that you're supposed to be really good at. But we've talked about that and just working into the story.
Is what it is.
Figure out
that's the game.
Yeah, maybe why, where's your headspace in? But that's a big one. Is that figure out what you're good at and be good at it.
Yeah. Also for DMs, if you're struggling for like, am I putting too many monsters at them? Am I doing too less? Is it going to be too easy, too not? There are a bunch of like challenge rating. Challenge rating is crazy and it doesn't make much sense.
It almost never works.
But there are challenge rating calculators out there. Like I use a really good one. I'll probably put the link down below, where you put in how many players you have, what level they're at, and it gives you a ballpark of like, here's how many of like CR8s they can handle. Here's how many of like CR3s they can handle. And of course, like the range is like, they can handle 3 to 12 CR4s. You're like, okay. Like,
give us your advice on, because this is also going to be, we're just full of hot takes here. How do you feel about like fudging rolls or fudging HP and stuff like that? Because we're very much on the same page when it comes to those things.
Only if it benefits the player experience. Like there's really nothing else to say other than that. Like don't ever fudge rolls in your advantage unless you're trying to, like you're playing Curse of Strahd and they meet Strahd when they're level 3 just to give the imposing figure thing, and you want to give them like a TPK just to show them how powerful Strahd is, and then Strahd fucks off and they wake back up and whatever. Like unless it serves a narrative purpose, don't fudge rolls for yourself. Always fudge rolls in their favor, or if it makes sense narratively. Like if you're fighting the rogue's father at the head of the Thieves Guild, but the paladin lands the finishing blow on him, no, they don't. The finishing blow is landed by the rogue. So like fudge it enough to where like it's
going to be the most rewarding for that player.
For the player. Yeah. So and if they have 2 players down already, there's only 2 players left, your big bad has 40 HP left and you just critted. No, you didn't.
Please no, you didn't.
You didn't crit. Like fudging like that, just ways to help them out. But don't fudge all the time either, because it is a very randomized game, and that is what it is,
And sometimes you're going to crit on your players 3 times or 4 times in a single fucking combat, which has happened to us before. There was one time that you critted twice in a row, like consecutive turns against our human fighter.
It is what it is.
And he was just like,
But
okay.
But he's the tank. He's there. His AC is like 20 something. It's
true.
about to be even higher. Like, Yeah, I mean, that's what they're there for. And like, they're there to take those hits. And when he does, like, he's doing a good job. Good job. You're doing your job, kind of thing. You're taking the hits so that they don't. And yeah, sometimes you are going to go down. And if one of your players goes down, that's okay. Because that's what it's designed for. Just if you've done your research, you did the challenge rating stuff, everything's good, you're fine. Don't freak out.
Yeah.
That's just a good general rule across the board. Just don't freak out.
Yeah. And I'm going to use, this is something that's a little, I mean, it's related, but it was said from Brennan Lee Mulligan one time when he was talking about like behind the scenes and how he was like, if someone were to look behind like on all of my notes, like I probably wouldn't have a job anymore because it would be like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
And when it comes to like homebrewing your own monsters, but like you're not really like the numbers person, use a brown bear stat card and then just call it whatever the fuck monster that if it's a big burly looking monster, whatever that is, just use whatever else. No, your players aren't going to know. It's just numbers. Sure. Like you can name it whatever you want. Yeah,
no reason to challenge yourself and have to make like a stat block from scratch unless you really want to.
Because I've tried to do that and I'm like, oh my god, oh god, I can't do this. And it was like, nope, you're going to be a giant bat. That's the stat block that I'm going to use because like I had the creature in mind and I was like, oh, I can't do this. This is too many numbers for me. This is too complicated. Yep. We're using the giant bat card.
Yeah, sometimes, and then they end up being way too overpowered or underpowered, and it's just it's a headache. Like just use the stat block stuff because this stuff has been play tested and proven to be somewhat balanced. I'm not going to say it's perfectly balanced across the board, but
because the dice are always, you're at the mercy of the dice.
Exactly. That's the beauty and bad thing about playing a randomized game is that we're all at the mercy of the dice. But if you've designed it well and you've done your homework, then most of the time, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
But that's all I really have for this. You got anything else?
Nope.
Cool. I think we covered it. Great.
That was a good segment.
Yeah. No word from our sponsor because our sponsor is us. Go listen to The Scarlet Threat on Spotify or Apple.
Yes.
But with all that being said, let's finally get into the interview with Mr. Rick Perry himself. Be sure to stick around after that because we got some of your hot takes.
Yeah.
Coming up right after the interview.
Stay tuned.
We'll see you.
Special guest! Special guest!
Alrighty, welcome back to Goblin Gab, and with us today is a very special guest. We are joined by Mr. Rick Perry. Rick, thank you so much for joining us here on the show.
Howdy, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. If you don't know, which I don't know why you wouldn't, but...
how would you not?
Yeah, Rick Perry is the production designer, producer, mini crafter extraordinaire over at Dimension 20, currently right in the middle of Fantasy High, and I believe you're hot in the middle of an auction that is benefiting the PCRF. You're auctioning off old Fantasy High minis, which is super awesome.
That's all true. Yeah, I work on Dimension 20. I've over 6 years now. I've been on the show, and we're working on like our 24th or so season, so I've been doing it for a little bit.
Yeah, congrats, man. That's a long, good run of some D&D-ing right there, living the dream.
Yes, I feel very lucky to get to keep doing it. It's awesome.
What's your history with TTRPGs D&D? Did you grow up playing it as a kid, or is this relatively new?
I grew up outside of Austin in the country, and I remember going to the mall and seeing the second edition box set in the bookstore at the mall, and I asked my mom if we could get it, and she said, "Oh no, that's the Devil's Game." So
there it is.
Yep.
But that kind of I was really curious about it after that, and we did play. My brother and I played the Marvel superheroes game as kids, and then in high school, I would read other people's D&D books in art class, and then when I went to undergrad, I finally got to play in a really epic second edition game. The RA for the dorm that I lived in, he was this notorious, incredible dungeon master. Shout out to Jermaine Wooten, and he would run a game every year that was where the players, this epic game, they would rent out a room, play all night, and with 12 players, and the players were all playing the descendants of previous classes characters. So it was like this, original campaign setting that had these like this whole lineage, like you were the son of so and so who was there like 5 years ago playing. So that set the germ fully in my brain after that.
Man, all it takes is a really good DM to really get you hooked, because you can like go back and forth with like, your friends or something when you're 12, but then when you finally have that good DM when you're like in college or something, you're like, oh, this is what this could be. It's an incredibly awesome storytelling device, which is great. What's your specific like background? Did you ever grow up? Were you like a theater kid, a band kid? I know you said you did art just a second ago. Are you an art kid mostly?
I was mostly an art kid. I just grew up like drawing and painting, and I studied studio art, and then I moved to New York, and I got into TV and film production. So I've worked in TV and film for about 20 years, doing everything from set carpenter to painter to greensman to eventually more art directing and production design. So I have a lot of experience in that from that perspective. And I also studied directing and producing and writing in grad school at UCLA. So I have also have kind of a director writer's story brain.
That's awesome. I saw on your IMDb when I was doing a little bit of research that you worked on a Friday the 13th film. Is that true? What'd you do on that? How was that?
That was in Austin. It was the reboot of it from a few years ago. It was really fun. I worked as a on-set greens person, which is essentially a greens person is like a kind of like a landscaper for movies and TV. So anything from like mowing a lawn that's going to be in a shot to planting stuff. For Friday the 13th, it was really fun because we got through a lot of like craggy vines that are hanging into the bottom of frame, and we had made some big fake tree trunks that we would truck around with us. And then if they're like, oh, we can put one right in the front of frame that the camera could like peek out from. The funnest thing we did actually on that was we got to build a whole bunch of fake marijuana plants. Because there's a sequence at the beginning where they like find somebody's crop in the woods. And So we built these plants and then put them on the back of a stake bed, and we had to drive them from Austin all the way to Bastrop. We were getting a lot of eyes on them
with fake plants.
Like, no, I swear, officer, they're not real. They're plastic.
Yeah. It's like, smoke them, I promise, nothing will happen.
Yeah,
yeah, you probably would die because there was a lot of plastic and stuff.
How did the minis come about? Was it kind of a brand new thing when you got on Dimension 20, or had it been something that you've incorporated into your games before?
I used some miniatures before, but not much really. I sort of took a break from playing D&D for a long time. And then with 5th edition, I had sort of gotten way in, and I played at at a convention in LA. I played a bunch of a game of 5th edition and sort of understood. Then I really learned about the like combat strategic element of 5th edition, which is not necessary. You don't have to use it for the game, but it is very well written and functional and kind of a lot of fun to play if you like that sort of stuff, if you like that kind of wargaming stuff. So I knew a lot about it, and I was starting to use minis in my campaign at home, but I didn't have experience with building miniatures and model making for TV and film, which is a whole area of filmmaking and stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing about production design and art department work is first of all, no two jobs are the same. We're kind of gig-based freelance workers, and whatever the job is, you have to kind of become an expert at it in order to do it. Whether it's making fake marijuana plants, you have to go and figure out what they look like, and you have to make a plan about how you're going to do that. And so all that to say that, when we got into miniatures, it was something that I was already interested in, but I had that production designer's brain of being able to figure it out. And also, I'm smart enough to hire people that know a lot more and are way more talented than me to help us get the job done. So.
Right. Well, that's awesome. I was curious, so that makes more sense now that you have an art background. So for when it comes to designing these super wacky, unique, miniatures and set pieces for Dimension 20, does someone just give you the idea, or does someone give you, a drawing, or do you make up your own sketch first and then go off of that, or what's your design process like?
Yeah, well, a cool thing about my job to me is, I'm not just a production designer. Normally, if you have like a script or something that you're making a TV show or a movie or a short film from, that script sort of tells the story already, and you have a lot that you're basically sort of processing and breaking down. And you work with the director to figure out, well, we want to do this with a lot of blues, or, this is evoking this other film, or, so you're kind of working within those pre-described constraints. For Dimension 20, first of all, almost every setting, every season is like a completely new setting. It's a completely new world that didn't exist before the show. So there's an immense amount of world building that has to be figured out. And also, the DMs typically when we start on a season, they don't have the complete season figured out. They may have like notions. Right. They may be like, well, I know one battle takes place in a high school cafeteria and they're fighting cream corn oozes. But then there's another 7 or 8 battles they got to be figured out. So we spend a lot of time in this kind of development phase. It's almost like a writer's room with the dungeon master and myself and some of the producers and Michael Schwabach, our director, and we kind of figure out, we workshop the whole season, we figure out what all these other battles are and who are they fighting, and and we get into the world building details of like, who are these people that they're fighting, or whatever the situation is, so it takes time to do that. It takes usually a couple of weeks, and it's a really fun part of the job for me because it sort of gratifies the writer director part of my brain that loves to do that kind of, writing stories and world building. And then once we get it figured out, I go away and I put together, a budget and a schedule, and I hire a crew and then do a bunch of design work, cranking out drawings and reference and stuff. And then we spin up a shop and then we build the stuff.
Have you ever had like an idea or a design or a drawing, like, you present it to your director or the DM and they're like, this is too wacky? Or are they like, no, bring it on, like wacky or the better type thing?
I mean, definitely both have happened over the course of the 6 years. There are definitely times it's a really fun process. There's sometimes that like maybe the DM is like, there's just so many things that we have to figure out. So we end up not being precious about all of them, the DM especially. And so there's room where it's like, just figure out something for that other thing, and sometimes what I come back with is maybe too wild, or usually it's not really too wild. It's usually more that like, if I figured out like, oh, this should be a giant frog or whatever that they're fighting. Yeah. And then the DM will be like, well, actually, there's this whole amphibian theme that comes up later, and I don't want these two things to be tied up, so let's go a different direction. So it's more things like that. I don't know. One mini that from that type of situation that I'm super proud of is we did a season called Starstruck Odyssey that was set in this space world, kind of like a Star Wars sort of thing.
Great campaign.
And okay, cool. Yeah, you've seen it. So there's a battle that takes place like a space gladiatorial arena where they're fighting these other like space gladiators, which was really fun. And for me, like super evocative, like The Running Man and like all these like 80s movies and stuff of that genre.
That's awesome.
And we had figured out that they're going to fight a giant corn brute thing. They're going to fight, which is essentially like a muscle bound axe murderer in like a corn plushie. They're going to fight, what was the other thing? They're going to fight these two like animal themed characters, and we needed one more bad guy, and we went around and around, like, we just kind of sometimes you just get into creatively you're just like out of gas or you can't break it.
Yes.
And I went away and I came back and I was like, oh, I got it. They're gonna fight a black obelisk that is basically from 2001, the plinth, and Brendan was like, I love it. I love the plinth. And I was like, awesome. And then of course the plinth, once the battle happened and they were being introduced to all these spectacular characters and it has this whole TV vibe. And then there's just the plinth and it's strangeness, otherworldliness, freaked them out. So that was really,
in the best way.
Gratifying. Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. So I know that you have the auction going on right now. How did that come about? What did that start? Talk a little bit about it. I tried bidding on something and then I got very swiftly outbid. I definitely wanted one, but I don't have the kind of money that people were throwing down for this. But it's a great cause, and I would love to hear you talk about it.
Sure. Yeah. It's wild the amount of money that some of the minis have gone for. So we over the course of a season, that especially a mini season, as a show, we generate all these miniatures and these battle maps and all this sort of material that we shoot close-ups of it, but then we put it in crates and it goes into storage because it's an asset. It represents a significant amount of time and money that that the show has put in, but also it doesn't really have a use necessarily unless we were to want to use it for something. So they just kind of store it. And we've had, those things have been piling up from all these seasons. And so there was the idea, it's come up a few times, but they finally got serious about it, that what, we should do an auction. And they usually give about 25% of the profits of the auction to a charitable cause of some kind, and so that part's really cool. And I guess I was sort of conflicted at first about it, because it's like this, it's sort of, I don't know, just it feels weird, kind of you make something and then it's getting sold for all this money and people are kind of fighting each other over to be able to bid and stuff. But then I thought about how there's something very kind of magically ephemeral about the show and really about TTRPGs in general, and even the creative process where like I described, you start in these creative meetings where a miniature, any given miniature starts as some conversation, and then we figure out a design for it. And then we hire a crew who, help us build and paint it. And then it goes to the table and it's used at the table during the actual taping, and the players, the cast give it life, and it has this whole kind of meta context and stuff. And then we shoot close-ups of it, which is a whole nother kind of area of craft. And then it's done. And so that whole process, all those people that have been involved in that creative process to create, which is essentially the show, a lot of their work is sort of invincible and ephemeral and sort of goes away at the end in a way, and all you're left with is just show. But the miniature is kind of this little artifact. It's a little, existing crystal of that whole process of all those people's contributions. And so I don't know, when I think about it like that, I'm like, that's pretty cool that these things are kind of powerful. And it makes me also, I realized after figuring that out, I was like, oh, that's why people collect props from movies and stuff, because they represent this singular sort of experience. It's a way to connect to something. So it's pretty cool. It's awesome. It's really cool. I'm super, it wasn't my decision, but I'm super proud to be part of this big contribution to the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund this time around. And it just makes it that much cooler to see these things selling for a bunch of money.
Yeah, it's a great cause.
Amazing. Yeah,
honestly.
And so speaking of the minis, do you have any that stand out as your favorites? Do you have any that you've kept that are no, this is too special to let go?
Yeah, well, I definitely haven't kept any because I don't own them or anything that they're owned by the show. But not that I wouldn't have loved to keep some of them. I think we've made a bunch of really, really cool stuff over the years. I don't know. It's hard to pick a favorite mini. There's just been so many of them, but I don't know. What are y'all's favorite seasons? Or I know you said you watched Star Trek, but
Oh yeah, no, Starstruck was great. Honestly, like it's the easy answer, but Crown of Candy is just like next level. Ravening War, both of those are just exceptional. Like the mini designs is something that just like I couldn't ever, my mind just couldn't, come up with. But it's those are awesome.
Yeah,
like,
there's something that I specifically love about like when you mix together, like it's such a juxtaposition of political distress and like just betrayals, but everyone looks like fruit and cake and candy, and like there's something just so whimsical and hilarious, but then it's mixed with these like deep, dark, like treacherous like stories, and it's just I love the combination of that.
Yeah, Lord,
thank you.
Cruller has to be one of the best, I think. The cake, like I loved him.
Calroy Quiller, great mini. Also, that mini sold for like $11,000. It's definitely the mini that has brought in the most money than of any other mini in our auction. But
that's awesome.
Those seasons are so fun. I don't know if I had to pick one from those seasons, I would say working on Ravening War was kind of like a dream because I am a huge Critical Role fan and I'm a fan of Matt and he's just a nice person. So it was really fun to get to work with him and. Spoilers for the end of Ravening War, but the final guy that they fight, Deus Puzzle, who is a garbage disposal inspired character. It just was really fun to figure out. Like Matt had this idea, he's like, I want this really big mouth. Like his whole chest should be a mouth, and so figuring out, I'd be like, okay, but actually garbage disposal is very circular, so in a mouth kind of not so much. And so figuring out the anatomy, and I was like, oh, this guy is just going to have like a super like ripped back, like these really like the muscles and stuff have been stretched. Yeah. So drew all that stuff up and then handed it off to a very talented 3D sculptor who digitally created a model that we printed out. But that was really fun, weird one. And another detail about that, in order to like make it as scary as possible, we the sort of interior of the disposal we painted with I think it's called the blackest black. It's like a type of black paint that really won't let light in, so they made it a little bit darker or whatever, but it was fun.
Very ominous.
That's cool. Do you have any like private D&D games that you play now, or is it like you do it for a living, so it's not the same doing it on your off time, or do you still like to play?
No, I love playing. I play as much as I can, between work and having two small kids. It's hard to, play as much as I probably could or want to, but I definitely play. I actually run a game for my oldest kid and some of the neighborhood kids, which is really fun. Yeah, it's so cool, and they're so just fun to play for. Shout out to Willie and Seamus and Ronan and Rin, who keep me busy on that front. And then I play in a few other games. I've been playing in a Dark Sun 5th edition, like a 5th edition adaptation of Dark Sun for a long time. And I just started playing in a Shadow of the Demon Lord game, which is really cool, fun system. Yeah. What do y'all play games, or is your okay?
Definitely, yeah. We play a little bit of actual plays on and off. Like we kind of vary between this season has kind of been more the podcast, but we have a few actual plays, and then we do have a home game that we don't like film for content, that we're actually wrapping up a campaign right now, and it's
year-long campaign.
Oh my
God.
Done.
Wow! Yeah. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, it's like a big group too. There's 7 of us total, so to get together that often, it's great. Very rewarding.
Or is one of y'all the DM, or?
Yeah, I am. I love DMing. Do you DM, or is it mostly like playing thing?
So you run for your kids, but do you have a preference?
I like both. Certainly DMing is a lot more work, and
yes.
and I kind of in the past was sort of like the forever DM. I mean, there was a period of time where I just didn't have a circle of friends that played D&D, but I would still like read the books. I would get a bunch of them, like read them cover to cover, but like didn't have anybody to play with. And then like, if it was my birthday, I could, my girlfriend would be like, well, what do you want to do for birthday? I'm like, we're going to play Dungeons and Dragons. And I would get some friends like, it's my birthday. You have to do what I want to do. I'm going to run this game and we're going to play it, which was always fun, but it just, plus the cool thing about being the DM, the secret is it's always your turn, whereas if you're a player, you got to like wait for your turn. But as a DM, it's pretty much always your turn.
That's so funny though, that's your birthday and that's how you'd like to spend it. That's kind of how we got started playing D&D is his best friend wanted to have a game night with a bunch of us. And so, we all got together and there was like, 6 or 8 of us. And we just played regular like board games and, whatever. We kind of all brought something. And then at the end of it, he reached out to him and was basically like, hey, I've always wanted to play D&D. Meaning, hey, I want you to run D&D for me because we kind of all knew that he would be a good DM and he is. And so, we started playing and now it's been a year of that.
Yeah. Has your work on Dimension 20 like shaped the way that you do encounters or anything like that now? Like, do you design minis or encounters like any differently? Or has it been pretty steady?
Not so much encounters as really there's some very cool things about my job as far as actually being a dungeon master, because I get to hang out and work with like some of the world's greatest dungeon masters as they build epic campaigns. And so that's cool. But what's really cool is when we're shooting and I have been there for much, not all, but much of the prep work. And I'm seeing the players now being exposed to it the first time. So the perspective that I have is very unique. And I can see, like, I know what Brennan or Bria was planning for this encounter or this moment, but I can see that like the players maybe are sort of like shifting in this other direction. And then to see how like Brendan or Bria or whoever will switch things up or, make decisions on the fly because we sort of, the way that we build it, we don't quite, it's not like it's on, railroad tracks, but we sort of have these like big encounters that are sort of pre-designed. They're kind of modular, but they're sort of pre-designed that the DM needs to get the players to these sort of checkpoints in a way. Right. And so to have that perspective of like, well, originally we designed this for these were supposed to be the bad guys and those are the people they're saving, but now things have changed and like those are actually the people they're saving and these are the bad guys now because XYZ, but the players never even, or the audience never gets that perspective, So anyway, having that proximity to seeing how really great DMs do stuff has definitely, I feel like, been like an ongoing masterclass for myself, and I definitely like try to grab all those things that they do and bring them into my games.
Hey, we do that too, and we're not even anywhere close to them, and we steal from them, and they're prolific, and the work you do is prolific as well. Honestly, do you have anything else?
Let's see. Yeah, no, that was. Oh, okay. So in terms of the set pieces, because like, especially when you do film those close-up shots of like the miniatures and like, especially Crown of Candy and like the designs and like the world and everything's made of, what was the most, does anything stand out as like the most tedious, like the most complicated, like build?
Most tedious or complicated build. Well, definitely some of them are easier than others. Anything that involves LEDs adds a layer of complexity. There's some interesting challenges that we have when we're doing designing and building battle maps because our cameras are in fixed positions, right? Mm-hmm. And so the set exists in the table in front of everybody, and the way we're set up, it's usually in like the bottom 25% of the screen, which is cool because it connects all the shots and you get a sense for the space and where everybody is. But that also means that if you wanted to put like, say, a tree or a tower like right here, in front of somebody's face, you can't do that because it's going to block a cast member. So you have these like strange technical requirements about where you can sort of have height. And then also because we shoot those close-ups, so after an actual session happens and there's a battle, then after the whole season has been shot, Michael Schawbach and our team, Casey McGeorge and Raven and Jesse, they will go and recreate the battle and pick up these little insert shots with like little probe cameras and things they can fly around and they'll like puppet stuff, do all this really cute little stuff that makes it really nice for these insert shots. But in order to do that, it means that you have to be able to get the camera in there, which means a lot of times we're also thinking about how can this thing be magnetized? Like, not only does the tree have to be in the right place, it also the limbs have to be able to come off seamlessly so that a camera can sweep through, and there's LEDs in there that have to disconnect or, so it starts to become, sometimes some of these things really quickly become quite complex in a way that is hopefully not even apparent to the audience, that is just really technical stuff behind the scenes for us to be able to do what we do.
Yeah, that's really fascinating because I never would have guessed that all of those close-ups are done when the entire season is completely wrapped up. Like, I never would have guessed that. So I feel like you're like the Wizard of Oz. You're the man behind the curtain.
Yeah, that's very true. Rick, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This was a great conversation. Appreciate you taking the time. We'll put all the links down below. Link to the auction that he has going on to benefit the PCRF. Links to Dimension 20. Like you probably don't need that. Everyone knows how to get to Dimension 20. But yeah, Rick, anything else you want to plug before we sign off?
No, I mean, I'm on social media. I'm on Instagram at Richard H. Perry. But thanks. It's been a real pleasure talking to you all, and thanks for having me on. And hope to see you all sometime.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rick.
Always happy to talk to a fellow Texan. But yeah, take it easy, Rick. Thank you.
Right, cheers. See y'all.
Alrighty, welcome back. Thank you again so much to Rick Perry for sitting down with us. It was a great interview. Appreciate you taking your time. Now, for the last segment here, usually we play some games, have some fun, but I decided this time that we are going to read off some of your hot takes. So I asked the question on Instagram or Threads, I think I asked, one of those, both of those. But go follow us on there, by the way, if you aren't. Those links are down below.
You say some goofy shit on Threads.
Yeah, I do say some goofy shit. Not all the time. You're better at Threads than I am. But I say some out-of-pocket stuff. Go follow us there because we'll ask questions a lot about, certain, to get y'all's input on episodes. But I did ask specifically for your hot takes.
Yes.
Your D&D and TTRPG hot takes, and there are some spicy ones.
So let's get everyone get their teacup ready.
Get the tea out.
It's piping hot.
Yeah, it's some piping hot. So this one, we're starting a little lukewarm, and we're going to get a little hotter as we go along.
Okay.
This Drew says that role-playing is more fun than combat 95% of the time.
I think some of the old heads are going to be screeching in their seats with that. But I do think that a lot of people who have gotten... I would argue that if you've gotten into D&D in the last 5 years, you probably agree with that. Because that's what you know the game as. It is a role-play game first.
I feel like that's the thing. Is like 5e kind of took on the more role-play aspect. And then like all the stuff that's coming out after, like the games that are coming out after, it kind of has that same expectation of like, even if it is like a mechanics-heavy system, quote-unquote, like there's still elements of like, very big role-play. Like Daggerheart is a good example of like a system designed for people who want to role-play together. Obviously, because it's spawned from Critical Role's Daring Some Press, so people who watch Critical Role obviously want to role play a lot because that's what Critical Role does. So, but that's just modern TTRPGs because of Critical Role, because of Dimension 20. Role play heavy games are just the norm now.
Yeah.
So it is a hot take for certain people, but
it's a very hot take in the like wide spectrum of D&D and in its existence.
Yeah.
Like in its entirety.
Because a lot of the old heads and stuff that still play, it's like no, because it started out being a combat heavy.
It was war strategy.
Yeah,
that
based
was
off
minis.
of a war strategy game. And then they incorporated the dungeon crawling stuff in there.
Like it wasn't even a game first; it was genuine strategy.
Yeah. But yeah, it's kind of taken on a life of its own. And most of the tables that I play at are very excited for the role play aspects. Even the new table that I just started playing with, one of the guys was like, "Hey, I'm not huge on role play, but I'll try to get into it." By the end of the session, dude was ripping out like speeches as a bard.
The bard.
Yeah, he was ripping out he sat down to the big bad and was just like letting him have it. I was like, where did this come from? I was like, sometimes you don't know that you have it in you, And
I think that's the most important thing is that you have to. I think I've said it on this like a dozen times by now, but you just have to you have to give yourself permission. You have to allow yourself to let that piece out of you.
Sure.
Because I've spent so long being like, I'm just not good at voices. I'm just not good at accents. No, it's the same thing with anything else. If I just research it a little bit and give myself some fucking notes to go on and some little phrases to practice, it's actually it's not as hard as I'm thinking that it is. I'm really limiting myself a lot of the time.
For sure. Yeah. But role playing isn't always just, and I'll say this, a million times till the cows come home, as they say in Texas. But role playing is not always doing voices, creating dialogue, doing this. Role playing is just making decisions that your character would make.
Yes. And we will say that as many times as it takes to get through to everyone, because that's really what it boils down to.
100%. But a little bit of a lukewarm mid take, not mid, but little middle of the road kind of take as far as spiciness or coldness goes. Kate Corsack, a good friend of the show, on a couple episodes ago, she says, this is a little bit of a hot take. We're getting spicier here. She says shorter sessions are the way to go, because if she plays sessions longer than 2 hours, she starts zoning out.
That's fair.
So under 2 hour sessions.
I would not under 2 hours. Because I feel like by the time you get situated, and especially if you don't have the most punctual group, you show up and dick around for 30 minutes before you actually get settled in, and then you're...
That's true.
It's like when I was in high school, we went from having 4 hour-and-a-half long classes to the normal 6 or 7 45-minute classes. It sucks. I liked having less classes that were longer, because it was as soon as you get concentrated and you get in the zone, it was bells up, time to go. And it feels like that a lot in D&D. It's by the time I get into the zone and we're starting combat, and now it's over. And now we're still only halfway through this combat, and that's going to be most of the next session.
Yeah, I totally get where she's coming from, because longer sessions can totally feel like a slog. And part of me is excited by marathon sessions. Part of me is man, it would be so much fun to go away for the weekend and play 8 hours a day or something, in a log cabin somewhere. Part of me thinks that's awesome, but then the other part of me is man, I'm so tapped out even after 3 hours.
No, yeah, my social battery looks at that and is what?
Yeah.
You want to do what?
It's tough. I guess I disagree with the 2 hour mark, because there's, like you said, there's not a lot you can get done, and it's going to take you a very long time. And so, people have to drive. So some people, it takes them 30 minutes to get here. Mm-hmm. We dick around for 30 minutes. We have an hour with breaks and stuff, an hour of actual play time. We're not going to get anything done. And then you got to drive back home 30 minutes. So it's you got to find the right balance. You got to make it work.
I think, I recently did a questionnaire for new players, and I think my choices of how long would you want your ideal session to last was under 2 hours, 2 to 4 hours, or 4 to 6 hours. And personally, I am perfect in that 2 to 4 range, because 2 hours is a great start. If it goes to 4 by the end of it, if it's a good session and a good table, those 4 hours are going to fly by. But anything more than that, once you start getting to I've seen a lot of people say oh, I love a 6-8 hour session. That is a work day. And I'm guarantee you right now, no matter how much fun I have, I'm going to be fucking dead by the time we're done with that. And especially we host at our house. Yeah. Get out of my house. It's been 8 hours. Go. Please leave. I need to chill.
I get it. I mean, if you take breaks and eat enough, and especially if you're not drinking, whenever we play on Sunday nights, so that's the day before the work week starts again. Yeah. I usually save my heavy drinking night for Sunday. Heavy, I mean 3 or 4 beers.
Yeah. You're not throwing them back.
I can't.
Not anymore.
I can't throw them back anymore. I'm too old for that. But it's my heavy drinking session, which is 3 beers. But yeah, it kind of brings your body down and whatever. If I actively committed to having high energy and doing this, I probably could go on about 6 hours.
I could.
A good 6 hours.
I could. Yeah. I wouldn't want to do it regularly though.
Yeah, totally fair. Totally fair, Kate. Thanks for your input. Let's see. Woodworking says this is getting a little bit spicier too, but I kind of agree with this, and this was an interesting one.
Okay.
He says sometimes let players narrate as the GM does, especially when it comes to their characters.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I like it because they're...
How would you do that as a DM? How would you like...
Well, I would approach you at a game, and remember how I did those those prequel things, like the flashbacks?
Oh, for Cinder.
Yeah, like I did one for her. I did one for Ilara. I did one for Vale, who was married to the bad guy. So I did I did these like flashbacks of their life, and I wrote down 4 or 5 paragraphs of like a tiny little story of something that affected them, whatever. So I would come to you at a game, and I'd be like, "Hey, do you want to have a flashback before this session starts?" And I was thinking that maybe you could flash back to, what I did for Ilara, who's our tiefling druid. Right at the beginning of that session, y'all were having to deal with a betrayal of like someone that you knew, and so I shot back to her having trauma around betrayal because her parents got killed by her longtime like mentor she looked up to, the King's Guard, whatever.
And he like betrayed her entire family.
Yeah, he sold them out and like let the opposition come into the castle and like overthrow the king or whatever. So I would come to like a player and I'd be like, I have this idea, because I think it fits in narratively with what's going on now. Do you want to take it and run with it and kind of like craft your own little story and say it as a prequel?
Yeah.
I would like to do that.
That's really fun.
Yeah.
And
interesting.
It's definitely something that like you shouldn't force onto your players because not every player is like comfortable with having either that much spotlight or they don't feel like they're creative enough to do it. So
yeah,
definitely don't make them do it. But for somebody like me who, has that writer in me, I loved when you came to me and was like, hey, this session we're going to start off Cinder as a teenager and it's going to be her first interaction of her first time seeing a real dragon. Yeah. And that was such a pivotal moment. And of course it tied in beautifully to that session. Yeah. And it was very relevant.
But yeah, so I see it. I think that's cool. That's a cool idea.
Very cool.
As long as you don't overdo it. It's not like every session or whatever.
I have seen an alternative of that though, where like groups will take turns, like each session someone else DMs. I don't know how I feel about that because I think that there's so many potential different ways that one person to the next DMs. That would be so hard to do.
Keep continuity.
A campaign where the way that someone is narrating is constantly changing, because what if you have like starkly different ways that you like to DM or like you like to narrate or how you interpret rules and like then it's changing every single time?
Everyone would know the story. It's like what are we doing here if y'all all know the story?
I guess it would really only work in like an anthology type of campaign, like where everyone is like making a one shot for
or like a 3 or 4 shot kind of thing for each other's part. It's like I get that,
I've seen
but
those.
I'm too much of a story driven guy that like first of all your hands are not going anywhere near my story.
That's how I feel about that's how I feel about the DM writing my backstory. No, I don't need your, no offense to you or any other DM, but I don't need help writing my backstory. Like I will come to you if you have ideas, bring them to me, absolutely, but I'm good.
Yeah.
Like this is my character.
And I don't mean to say like I'm not going to let my players shape the story. I do, and I change my story based on their actions. 100% I do, but like it's my story regardless.
Yes.
And you're not allowed to touch it.
No, but that's fair.
And I wouldn't allow it. And it's just y'all knowing the story ahead of time. But I do see like maybe in like 3 or 4 shot like anthology stuff. Sure, it doesn't sound fun to me, so fuck that. All right, we got 2 left. Okay. These are the spiciest ones I could find. I disagree wholeheartedly. Shout out Joe. Sorry about this, buddy. Joe said on Threads, less dice rolling the better.
No. Because then you're not playing D&D. And I have seen the discourse of like, oh man, we'll go through a whole 2-hour session and like we'll roll the dice one time, and that's the type of D&D we're playing. And I'm like, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're not playing D&D.
Yeah, you're just sitting around telling
just LARPing.
campfire stories. You're LARPing.
You're LARPing.
That's 100% what they're doing at that point.
You're LARPing.
And,
which is fine, but don't call it D&D.
Yeah.
Because the whole point.
If you want to LARP, go do that. But dice rolling is...
part of the game.
The randomness and everything that the dice tell. Yeah, and I get it. It's probably because if he's a DM, I don't know Joe very well personally, but if you're a DM or GM and you don't want your characters to fail, or if you're a player and you hate failing, I will respond that I always say that like nat ones are an opportunity. Like failure is an opportunity to be funny. Failure is an opportunity for your character to learn from something.
Or to be emotional.
Yeah, or to be emotional or something. It's like, yeah, if like you as a tiefling bard or Gwen as a rogue rolling a nat 1, the one roll that she would need.
She has a plus like 15, not even dramatizing, like plus 15 to sleight of hand.
So you roll, the only roll that you would fail this sleight of hand check is a nat 1, and she rolled it. And
then we all fought a bunch of dwarves on the dock.
Yeah, y'all had a brawl. Like Chris ended up kicking one of them into the ocean.
Which was hilarious.
It was a fun little brawl.
It was really funny because we did, and none of us, we all kind of talked to them. We're like, hey, we're not trying to kill these guys, but like they were bullying us a little. They were being kind of shady, and we're going to bully them a little back. And it was hilarious. And it was such a funny little, we had been doing so much like big serious shit because we are at the end of the campaign that was such a refreshing little encounter to throw in there, but that wouldn't have happened had she not rolled in that one.
No. So if it is because you're frustrated with failure or whatever, just know that like you can make that part of the story and make that just as cool of a moment as it would be if you rolled in at 20. So I mean, I get it, but also the tactileness of just getting the dice rolling, like that's all part of the game, like the anticipation,
like
and
the clickety clackities make me happy.
Yeah, and it's like it's
so
just
satisfying.
I'm sorry, but it's just too integral of a part of the game that I would no. I won't say the more rolling the better, but give them opportunities to roll.
Yeah,
often.
Well, and I feel like we've talked about this before, but it's like never hide crucial information behind a check.
Yeah, nothing that if you want them to know about lore, and also don't make checks for everything. Like I was DMing again for my new party the other day, and they found a table with a lot of plans and maps and correspondence on it, and she was like, "Okay, what do I need to roll to like read this stuff?" And I was like, "Homie, you can just read it. Like, you just look at the table and read it. Like, you don't have to roll for that kind of stuff." She's like, "Oh, okay, I didn't know that."
Yeah.
It's like, no, you only roll if there's a chance of failure.
Yeah. And like, I think I mentioned this the other night, but like, if you're going into an ancient tomb and there's murals carved into stone on all the walls, I'm not going to make you roll for perception and all of a sudden you go blind because you rolled a 1 and you can't see what's on the walls. But do you recognize them? Are they in a language that you can understand or read? Do you recognize, the story? Then roll about it. But I'm not going to be like, no, sorry, you can't see anything.
Yeah.
That's right in front of your face. Like, that doesn't make sense.
Exactly. So, yeah, disagree with that, but we're getting spicy. We're getting to the end, so I get it.
Yeah.
Spiciest take I saw was yours about the DMPC.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Go ahead, tell it.
Yeah, so Madame Lucille 222, whoever she is, on Threads, said
she's really hot. I hit on her a little bit.
Only all the time. I said that having a GMPC is really only bad if you're not a great DM.
So the only reason that I'll disagree with you on that is because there is a difference between like a NPC and a DMPC.
There is.
Like a DMPC is someone who was with you the entire time, making choices with you the entire time. And I don't agree that the DM should help, especially if you're with a big party. When we're playing by ourselves, yes, I think that might have shaped your opinion on this, because when we play together, a DMPC is almost essential.
It is essential.
Like
for sure is essential.
But you have to do it the right way, and so I agree with you on that. But if we're playing a 6-person campaign and I have a DMPC, like that's gonna do nothing but bog things down.
Yeah.
And insert myself into decisions I shouldn't be inserted in. So I disagree with you on that part.
And that's totally fine. And I absolutely shaped it in a way that like, there's way more nuance to that opinion than what I just wrote. But I wanted to make it a spicy take. But I do, especially when it comes to, and like the fact that I've talked to a lot of people, even my own like friend, Gia in Florida, the new players. I think if you are a DM to a group of newbies, having a GMPC is like having like a walking encyclopedia. If they have questions about anything, rather than stopping the game, unimmersing yourself and being like, hey, DM, what does this do? What is this? Having a GM PC in there to not necessarily make decisions for them, but it's almost like having them as like a beacon of information and a beacon of like where to go next.
But that can be an NPC.
I guess so.
You know, especially if it's like the campaign's just beginning, you know, like y'all's Sildar, you know, in Phandelver, if y'all are familiar, like he's there to kind of like lead you away a little bit. And then when y'all get to Phandalin, he fucks off. Yeah. But he's still around to help out. You know, I brought him back to go to or y'all asked him to go to Cragmaw and he did. You know, so he's there. But like, that's what I'm saying is the difference between an NPC and a DMPC is you have someone there all the time, like making decisions when they know the outcome.
Well, and I think but that's part of why I'm like, if you're a good DM though, because if you're a good DM, your DM PC is not going to make any decisions. Like, they're not going to, because they can't, because they know the outcome. Right. But it's more as just they're there of like to brainstorm with.
I get it.
Or if you get stuck.
Yeah, I get it,
and
but
I'm
I think
thinking of the players who need to be handheld a little bit more, or need to be coaxed a little more, or have a lot of choice paralysis, like that need like that leading.
But then you'll get into the problem where they lean on him too much.
Yeah, maybe.
You know, it's like that's all I'm saying. And so that is a very spicy take. But when we're playing with two people, there are ways to do DMPCs well. Yeah. I mean, you just kind of have to at that point. But
please, no one come for my life because I said that.
Yeah.
I'm being hyperbole. Like, it's a little bit of a hyperbole there, but
yeah, we'll see. No, they won't. It's fine. But that's all I got for spicy takes. We don't need to do an improv. This show's been going on a while. I'm kind of tired.
Okay, cool.
We'll save that improv bit for later.
Good, because it's kind of funny. I think it's funny.
Great. No, we'll do it next episode. Which next episode will be with Zach the Bold. We sat down and had a great conversation with him. Next episode is going to be all about story building. So I'm very excited to talk about that.
Okay.
We've talked world building. We've talked encounter building. Now we're going to talk story building. And so it's going to be a lot of fun.
Lovely.
And we had a great conversation with him. Thank you guys for checking out. If you're new here because you're a Dimension 20 fan or, fans of Rick Perry and his work, which you should be, everyone should be. Rick Perry is awesome.
Incredible.
Thank you for being here and listening to us. We have years worth of content out for you. We have actual plays, The Scarlet Thread, Edge of Nowhere. We have a lot of episodes of Goblin Gab. We have tons of funny skits on TikTok and Instagram if you want to go check those out.
Yeah. Our Red Flag DM and Red Flag player videos are quite funny and quite polarizing.
Yep, you've probably seen my face before if you recognize me from doing those polarizing videos.
Yep.
But thank you guys so much for checking us out.
We appreciate you.
We're here every week talking with someone of the community about D&D and TTRPGs.
Yeah.
And so thank you so much for Rick for coming on. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you next week with our conversation with Zach the Bold. It's going to be a great episode. So
bye,
see you
guys.
next week.
See you next time.